those two things going. Ave, right?
Yes.
Cool. That's a cool name.
Thank you.
Is that the name you were born with, or did you give yourself that nickname? Before we get into today's episode, I want to remind you, if you like the episode, give it a like, and if you really like it, subscribe. Let's dive in.
Well, it's actually Ava, but I just cut the A off when I came to Chicago. I was like, get that
Uh,
A out of here.
Chicago made you do it, huh?
Yeah.
What's the story behind that? Why did you decide to cut that off?
I don't know. I feel like Ava didn't really fit with me for some reason. Like when I came to school, I was like, I kind of want to just like change around who I am. And I feel like having to have a new identity for myself kind of helped with that. And then once I had Ave, I was like, okay, like I'm Ave. So like
Yeah.
make things around that or kind of, yeah, evolve myself with that.
I like that. I mean, I don't know if this is for everyone, but for me, when I went to school, like after I graduated high school, like
Mhm.
going to college is a huge opportunity to reinvent yourself. Always a huge opportunity to reinvent yourself. And
Yeah.
I think it's cool, like even doubly cool that you decided to kind of go all in with this idea. And not only obviously like you're in a new environment, you're meeting new people, but like you're gonna introduce yourself, you're gonna have a different identity, a whole name that goes along with that identity. And that's cool. That's really cool.
Yeah,
Um,
I remember when I first changed it, I was like, I think it was my freshman year, I was like out with pizza with my dad. And I was like, kind of want to change it up. So we're like Av, like Ave, and we're like asking people in the restaurant, like, what do you think of Av? And we were just kind of like seeing how it sounded. So it was weird the first week doing like intros in school. I was like, my name's Ava, but you can call me Ave. And then like slowly that just like got rid of that. And it was like, oh yeah, I'm Ave.
That's tough. I love that. I love that. I love that. Well, Ave, it's a privilege to have you on the show. You're someone who, as I was kind of explaining to you before we hit record button, you're someone who definitely piqued my interest when I was scrolling on Instagram. As we are all kind of inundated with algorithms and being on social media, there was
Yeah.
a piece of content that I saw that was yours, that was this process of you creating an aviator hat, which was this beautiful process. I thought it was like really well done. I think like your creativity and your creative energy kind of came out in that video. I was inspired so much that I picked up the red aviator, which I'm excited to kind of get in hand and see and visualize firsthand. And that's the entire kind of catalyst. That's the genesis behind why I wanted to get you on the show. I see that, or I saw that you follow Alexandra Massey. I don't know if you know her, but
Yeah.
I've
Yeah.
had her on the podcast before, so it's cool. Like I don't know if you have the opportunity to meet her or talk to her. So she's been on before, which is cool. And she actually just DM'd me today, randomly, like sent a whole long DM about overconsumption and fashion and things like that. So there's like connecting points there. But it's great to have you on. I'll start with, how are you doing today? How is your Thursday? I had to look at the calendar. How's your Thursday?
Thursday is good. I feel like I'm getting over a little cold, so I'm a little like, okay, it's
Mm.
Thursday. Like I feel like time passes so weird when you're because I'm like in the studio every single day, and I'm like, okay, what day is it? And I'm like, okay, it's Thursday. What month is it? Okay, this is. But yeah, today today's going good.
Good, good. And where are you at right now? Where in the world are you?
I'm in Chicago. I'm at my house currently.
Chicago.
Yeah.
I tell people all the time, Chicago, like I don't know what part of Chicago you're in, but the downtown area that I spend time is clean. It's actually very like the streets are, I'm in New York and
Mm-hmm.
I'm like looking at, like we've had a rainy day today. I'm looking at the ground. There's like so much gum. There's so much dog shit. There's so much just
Yeah.
nastiness on the ground. In
Yeah.
Chicago, you don't get that. You don't get
Yeah.
that same.
Chicago is pretty clean compared to.
Yeah.
I lived in the Loop for like 3 years when I was in school, and like whenever I would come back from the studio late, I would look, I'm like, wow, like it's pretty clean. I like visited New York a few years ago. I was like, wow, like comparatively, Chicago's doing okay.
Definitely, 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 definitely. Cool. So in Chicago, obviously like you're busy, you've been working. That's good. I love to hear it. I love to hear it. It seems like you've been busy. It seems like you're always like, just by scrolling on your Instagram, it seems like you're the type of person who's in their work.
Mhm.
But for this podcast, Ave, is I wanna kind of peel back the layers. I love peeling back layers on people and kind of getting to the root of who they are. And so for
Yeah.
the first question, I want to ask you, before, Sublime Elements, sorry, is that even the name? Sublime
Sublime.
Remains. Oh my God, see, what am I saying? Before Sublime Remains, kind of talk to me a little bit about your background, your backstory. Where are you from, and what was it like for you growing up as a kid? I'm curious.
Yeah, for sure. So I'm from Cincinnati, Ohio. So I grew up kind of in this small town called Wyoming. Both of my parents are artists, so I always grew up like in the arts, whether it be like at my dad's studio while he was painting, and then just going to museums, and always like talking about art, always doing art projects, and also just in the woods, like running around, hunting morel mushrooms and just like kind of foraging. So I always had those two elements like at the forefront of my
Mm,
childhood, which is really cool. Yeah.
definitely, yeah. Expand on that a little bit more. Like when you were, I mean, also you grew up in Wyoming, Ohio.
Wyoming, Ohio.
Come on, Wyoming, Ohio. I would have never guessed that that was a place, honestly.
Yeah.
Is that do people usually say that to you, or is that like not is that not a big topic? Because I've never met anyone from Wyoming, Ohio. I don't know much about Ohio. I
Yeah.
know like Dayton, I
Uh-huh.
know Cleveland,
Yeah.
those things, but like what is Wyoming like?
Wyoming is kind of like a little bubble community, I guess. Like we have our own bakery, our own meat market. We have all the school districts inside of it. So like you don't actually have to leave Wyoming if you don't want to. So it's kind of like
Mm,
in that sense. But yeah, I mean it was good. There was a really good art programs at my high school because I've always done like I was always into the arts. So like even in middle school or in high school, I took like drawing and painting, metals, ceramics, AP 2D. So I kind of always had that like I'm always like interdisciplinary, so trying to incorporate all these different mediums into my practice.
right.
Um, and then I would just go home and always get like critiques, or I could just go to my parents about like conceptual works, like, oh, like I have this piece. Like I
Yeah.
remember like, being a kid and like learning first like human anatomy and drawing people and kind of figure out like what my style was. I would like bring a drawing to my dad and be like, oh, like this is what I have. Then he would like sit it down and put tracing paper over it and like, this is really good. And he'd like ask me, like, oh, can I like draw on it? I'm like, yeah, okay, like it's fine. And then he would like show me like flow and like intersections and how like what not to do, what's more successful. So that kind of like put me in line on like just how I think, I guess, too.
Mm,
Um, yeah, and then even thinking like conceptually of like specific like meaning behind work, I would like really like figure out what I want to say with my mom, or like I would go on like conceptual walks a lot. So I would like walk around Wyoming at nighttime and just like go through ideas that I have about a specific piece. So they like really helped me to just like develop where I am now.
mm.
So yeah, it was really, really great childhood.
No, that's really interesting. And I feel like having both of your parents, you said, who were artists as well. I mean,
Yeah,
that's got to be an amazing resource, right? To have literally the people that not only who love you probably the most, who confide in them the most, be able to go to them at any moment and say, okay, like how would you improve this? How would you tweak this? What would you do here?
yeah,
At what age did you start kind of like what age did you start to show like an artistic inclination? Because you're talking about high school. Obviously, when you're doing coursework in high school,
yeah,
like you're specifically picking the courses that you want to be a part of in the school that you want to be a part of because
yeah.
you have this vision for your future. But like, what was Ave at 7, 8, 9, 10 years old? Obviously, you were out in the park playing. Were you also still artistic then, or like how does that work?
I was still, I mean, I was very like two-dimensional in like at the start of high school and into middle school. I was like, I would just always be drawing. So I still was like really creative, I feel like in middle school. Because the only stuff, I mean, like I remember middle school and it was great, but like the things that I really remember was like being in art class, or like aggressively like trying to draw this dinosaur that was on the wall to try to get it right, and like looking back at that, like seeing what it was, I was like, oh, I was still like so immersed
Mm,
in art, and I knew even from that, I feel like I knew from that age, like, oh, like I'm gonna be an artist, like this is gonna be like my full time.
I
And my
see.
parents were like super supportive of that too, because I was always like just surrounded by art and talking about art and like I just remember like as a kid just like going to art galleries on the weekends, or like and my family they both went to art school, so they have like their artist kind of community group that we would always hang out with each other,
Mm,
do like figure drawing or like so I'd always be like in these artist circles even at a super young age.
Definitely, definitely. Yeah. So for you, it just you always almost felt like you were in the art world
Mhm.
in some respects. That's kind of what I'm getting is like, well, you had your moments in Wyoming, Ohio that obviously you were outdoorsy, but like because your parents were also in the art world, like they're going to distill some of their livelihood, obviously not some of it, their livelihood onto you, right? You're going to be doing the things, you're going to be hanging out in the friend groups of like your parents, peers, and art communities of Wyoming, which is cool. Um, is there anything that like from your childhood that stands out to you that was like pivotal in helping you understand that I want to do art? Or was it something that like you just it felt natural because maybe that's a bad question actually. Maybe that's a bad question. Let me stay on script here. Let me stay on script. That's a bad question. I guess one of the questions I wanted to ask you that just popped up into my head was the art you and the work that you create now,
Mhm.
uh, with what you did at the Art Institute of Chicago, and then what
Mhm.
you did do at Sublime Remains, and I don't know the other projects you're working on. Was what you is what you create now something that you had a vision for when you were, high school, college, or is there a transition that happened kind of later on or more recently? That's kind of the question
Yeah.
I'm going with.
I feel like it definitely like the transition from like two-dimensional to three-dimensional happened from like going from high school to college. Because like in high school I was doing like wood etching and I also make longboards. So I was like making longboards and it was
Mm,
all just like 2D and like illustration and trying to like just create these like creatures and whatever I really wanted to do. I did like some three-dimensional work in high school, which was more like metalworking, and I still really love that. And I feel like when I transitioned into college, I was like, okay, I know I'm gonna do the art, be in the art world. I'm gonna kind of like try fashion design, just to kind of do something different than what my parents have done, So like, because my mom's a graphic designer, and my dad is a professor and he's a painter. So I've always had the 2D. So I was like, I think more three-dimensional. So I was like, I'm
mm.
gonna try this, this 3D element and see how it connects with me. And once I like kind of got into it and got into this groove, I'm like, oh, like this is like, and then I could still like incorporate my, 2D work and 2D illustrations, and just use that as a platform to three-dimensionalize things in the future.
No, definitely, definitely. So, and like stop me again because for me this entire interview,
Mm.
Ave is just about learning, honestly. And it's really fascinating to be able to kind of, and it should be interesting for you too to kind of look back on your life like this. I don't know how old you are, but you're probably pretty young if you just graduated. And in a lot of ways, I feel like when I have these conversations with people, like it feels like a good like therapy session because we get to talk about
Yeah.
all the things that like no one really asks you. So
Mhm.
let me just I'm understanding
Mhm.
because of the way that your parents because of their medium of choices, graphic designer, painter, and professor. That's
Mhm.
mom and dad. You were
Yeah.
focused heavily on 2D, right?
Yeah.
And when you got to University of or Art Institute of Chicago, excuse me, I almost said University of Chicago, Art Institute of Chicago,
Yeah.
that's when you made the conscious decision. Not only did you go through a kind of like rebranding of who you were in the sense that like,
Yeah.
I'm going to college. I'm no longer Ava, I'm Av, you know what I mean? Like I'm gonna be that. And then I also want to change the art style in which I create from, which is only doing two-dimensional work to becoming three-dimensional work, right?
Mhm.
Yeah. So that makes sense. Well, I mean, and like for you, when you look
Mhm.
back on how you
Mhm.
were feeling from going from high school to college,
Mhm.
kind of like walk us through or explain some of the moments, the decision to go to Art Institute of Chicago, of all the options that maybe were available. Because as an artist or a young creative, I think a lot of people who listen to this podcast who are also creatives, they're curious to know if they're younger, older, whatever they may be, the decision to get schooling or go to school and become a uh, amateur artist in college,
Yeah.
that decision versus like well, you obviously were probably pretty talented in high school. Why not just try to create things and monetize those things or sell those things straight out of high school? What led you to choosing Art Institute Chicago, and why did you actually go to school for your creativity and for art, if that makes sense?
Yeah, no, for sure. I guess like I mean I knew I wanted to go to college because I feel like I do better in like a group setting and critique to like hold me accountable. Um, so I feel like going with that mindset, I was like just doing research on different schools. And I knew I was like, okay, I'm gonna do fashion design and try that out. But still coming from like an interdisciplinary kind of background, like incorporating metals, now woodworking and painting. I still wanted to like learn those elements to try to like incorporate into what I was doing. And like SAIC, it was very interdisciplinary, so you didn't have to like just go into, drawing and painting, just go into photography. You could do photography, you could do metal work, you could do glass blowing,
Mm,
you could do shoemaking, and knowing that I like was like, okay, it feels like it's the right fit because I'm not like in a tunnel vision of like, okay, I have to do this. Like I could break out and incorporate all these different mediums if I wanted to. So that I feel like was the conscious decision of like, okay, SIC is like and like Chicago is really cool. I just like had a vibe when I came here. I was like, okay, I think this is gonna work out.
yeah, definitely. And what were some of the other schools they were looking at the time? Were they all kind of Midwest schools or Midwest options, or were you even looking in places like New York?
Yeah, I looked at Pratt. I looked at Columbus College of Art and Design was where my parents went. I think also the New School. Um, I don't remember the other ones, but yeah, it was mainly like, and I also like visited a lot of their programs, and their schooling. And I think it was just like the narrow-mindedness of like, okay, just being in the fashion department kind of was overwhelming, So like just
Mm.
having a back of like other mediums to kind of fall back on because I knew I could do other mediums. Um, yeah, and ended up working out.
Yeah, for sure. For sure. And I mean, now that you're done with school, you feel like it was the right decision to go to the school? Do you feel like it was ultimately the best decision for you to get your degree and go through the rigor of actually getting an education? I don't know what you graduated in specifically. I don't know the name of the degree. If it's fashion, I'm not sure. But like, did you feel like it was something that like you look back and you say that was the right decision?
Yeah. Yeah, so I graduated with a BFA. And I think it was the right decision. Like I learned, I mean, I can't speak for other artists, but
Mm,
like going into the fashion department, I just straight off the bat like learned, how to pattern, how to design. And they also are still like very encompassing like wearable art. So like having a conceptual, practice behind your work. Um, and also like incorporating other mediums. Like I took shoemaking my freshman year, and that's how I like fell in love with leather. And I'm like, oh wow, leather is awesome. And then I kind of like was like consciously like in the back of my head, like I'm gonna be using this in the future. So like my sophomore and junior year, I was making other pieces with the fashion department, but I was also taking accessory design and like working with bag making. Um, and still like using leather and then just kept falling more and more in love with it. And then also took like glass blowing. So I was able to incorporate and make like little beads to start embedding my pieces with. So it was all kind of just like this buildup of like, because I feel like like the more and more skills that I learn, I can just like keep pushing that into what I do. So I feel like it was like the best decision I could have done because I learned so much and I learned that I do think more three-dimensionally and they just help to like evolve that and kind of nurture it to like what I'm doing now.
no, definitely. And that's the thing that's the value that education is supposed to bring, right? Is
Mm,
it's supposed to build you up and help you develop skills that other people can develop. And I think for the art world, the creative world, it in a lot of ways fulfills that promise. It seems
yeah.
like it has for you because it's very difficult, and you hear a lot of people who talk about how like, oh, you can YouTube University anything, but it's
Mhm.
very difficult to YouTube University shoemaking or glass
Yeah.
blowing. Like you have to have a facility, you have to have proper instruction, you have to have people who are there to help oversee and have oversight of everything you're doing. And so like and it's fascinating to hear like because like I know we're going to talk about Sublime Remains and how like the leather aspect, the 3D elements are incorporated in your design as well. um but it's just good to also hear that okay, like there is a lot of value in being able to be in classrooms and be in labs and be in projects where it's
Mhm.
controlled in a school setting. And obviously Art Institute Chicago is like amazing school to actually graduate from. It's cool to hear you to speak on that. Were there any other classes that you can remember or highlight off the top of your head that kind of stood out to you and have helped you in your creative process greatly, like those two you mentioned with glass making and or glass blowing and leather making or shoe making, excuse me.
I think those were the main ones that I kind of, I mean, at least glass blowing was like one of the main ones that I kind of branched out on. I wanted to take like metals and like other classes. But also like the fashion department was like so like aggressively, time consuming that like okay, like I can do this, but like you're in the studio like 9 to 4, so you definitely build like a community within the fashion department because you're there so long. So like I could have also definitely explored a lot more, but I wasn't able to explore a crazy amount just because like I was like not sleeping and just like sewing and working in the studios all the time. But yeah, definitely like glass blowing. Um, also like the extra I took like, you know, history of performance art. Um,
Mm,
so that was also interesting. I took like opera and like rap classes and just a whole bunch of stuff that I kind of like try to pick stuff that was so different from fashion just because I was thinking about it so much. So like also learning about music and just like different aspects was also interesting to kind of like I think I took this one class. I don't know what it was. It's also like you discover like concepts of things that you want to do in like the most random places, I feel
mm,
like I was I don't know what history class I was taking, but we were like reading this book, and in it had the word like phantasmagoria, and I was like, oh, what is that? So I was like
mm,
immediately like went home and started doing research, and then from that became like my conceptual idea for like my whole sophomore collection, which was like a single garment that we had to do. But it was like a magic lantern show that happened in like the um, Victorian era. It's super interesting, but like little things like that, like if you when you put yourself into situations um, that you don't expect yourself to be in, like one word can be like what you focus on for a whole year if you just reach out and just try to experience new things.
totally. And I love the fact that a word can do that. I'm the type of person who, like, for me, words have like this really powerful essence to them. I like that might sound super dramatic, but I really believe in that heart of hearts. A word, because it's so funny you bring this up. I can't remember the exact word you said. How'd you say it?
Phantasmagoria.
Phantasmagoria. That's a special word.
No, right? I was like, yeah, that's something right there.
Yeah, that's different. That is very, very cool. Word, like, I don't know, words have this like way of they have meanings and they have history and they have all this going for them. I just recently discovered a word called ambrosia, which
Ooh,
I'm gonna look it up just one more time just so I don't mess it up. Oh God. Drew, can you think on the fly? Do. Oh yeah. So ambrosia is from like Greek and Roman mythology. It's defined as something very pleasing to taste or smell. And so
oh,
like like for one, say it one more time. Sorry.
phantasmagoria.
Phantasmagoria, ambrosia, these words are not like things that as English speakers and listeners we hear often, right?
Yeah,
But
yeah.
they can spark and they can extract so much inspiration. Like like I've not stopped thinking about ambrosia since I heard the word, and I'm literally talking about it in the podcast. And same for you. I mean, your project, even though you did your project, I don't know how long ago it was, like it's still something of a source of interest and intrigue and inspiration for your work and obviously for your kind of creative brain.
Mhm.
Also, I think you said something really important too for any creative. And I like to add like little tidbits for anyone who cares enough to have a little tidbit. This is like what I'm getting from you is like you often have to look in places that one intrigue you. Like the classes you took, they still intrigued you, but they weren't all fashion focused, right? They weren't so focused on your major.
Yeah.
And you don't know much about me. I make YouTube videos about fashion and reels and TikToks, whatever it may be. But even for me, like I consider like going out and making and creating videos a creative act. And if I were to only focus on what other fashion creators online are doing, I feel like my ability to create unique, fun, interesting videos would be diminished. And it
Yeah.
seems like for you, like it's similar in the sense that like when you're in school, like it was important for you to have references and pull from references that weren't necessarily exactly the target that you were heading towards. Because in
Mhm.
that way, you can kind of piece together this element and that element and that element. And then all of a sudden, you're creating your unique aesthetic, your unique look, your unique feel on a project that wouldn't have otherwise been brought together if you hadn't pieced together all these things.
Yeah.
Right. And I think that, for anyone who has any kind of creative aspiration or just anyone who wants to do something that is unique, right? To bring something unique to the table. I think that that is a really thought-provoking way to go about it is to not just do the things that are typically associated with a category, subvert the category, kind of bring a bit of nuance and a bit of different to the category with your ability to pull from different things.
Yeah.
We get it. Drew, you're talking in circles now.
No, no, I completely, even if it's like, you just have to break out of those like patterns of life. And it's like, even if it's as simple as, listening to a different podcast that you usually don't listen to every day. And like they might say something that really like, you're like, oh, I didn't know that, asparagus is found in this location. Or, like just something like out of the blue. And then it's like, that was a really weird comparison, but like it just you can pull from so many different things just by the simplest change in your day to day, which is really cool.
Definitely. Definitely, definitely, definitely. All right. Let's talk a little bit about Sublime Remains.
Yes.
I think we have a little bit of a picture of like who you are. You're a very artistic person, it seems like. I'll ask you this before I ask about Sublime Remains. Do you find as a creative, as an artist, or how, I have a lot of questions in my head actually. So, do you find as a creative or an artist that it's difficult to talk about your work? Like, do you find it like you find like you kind of shy away from talking about it? You rather let your work do the talking, or do you not mind?
I feel like it's a hitter. Sometimes I'm really good at like forming conversations, like when I'm not talking to someone in my head, I'm like, oh, like that would be really great to say, and then I forget when someone actually asks me, like if I'm like in a situation like, oh, like what do you do? I'm like, that is a crazy loaded question. So like, yeah, I do a lot of stuff, but like how do I break it down? And I'm like, yeah, wearable functional art, da 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 da, So I do like talking about it because I have talked about it a lot, but
Yeah.
yeah, it changes every day, I feel like
No,
slightly.
I feel like that's normal. I feel like that's normal, first and foremost. Like, especially when you probably touch so many, like you wear so many hats for what you do. So it's like, what do you want? Do you want the 3 minute version or do you want the 10-second version? Right? Because like that's unfortunately the world wants the 10-second version. The world wants, oh,
Oh,
yeah, exactly. Designer, or they want uh I don't even know. I'm drawing a blank right now. They want what is the job when people go on set and they like do costume design, costume director, whatever it may be. Like they want things that are easy to understand, right? Stylist, things that are
mhm,
easy to understand. And so when you kind of start hyphenating stuff, that's
mhm.
when people are like, "Oh, nice. Oh, good for you. That's good." And they probably have no idea exactly what you do, but
Yeah,
that happens.
yeah.
Um, All right, let's talk about Sublime Remains. Um, I guess I'll just ask another hard question, which is what is Sublime Remains?
Sublime Remains. Sublime Remains, I feel like is many different things, but it started originally it stemmed from my senior collection that I did. That was about creating my own hyper reality with roadkill. So that's kind of what I studied, like and researched a whole bunch. So I like took inspiration from roadkill and then made my illustrations, and then from those illustrations made like three-dimensional animals and creatures that would live on the body, and then thinking of like your garments as this new environment that the animals would live on to like hopefully connect people back to the sublime of nature through this like misformed version of nature.
Mm,
So now I think I'm still like evolving that because I'm still like out of school thinking on how it can, kind of transform because it is like Sublime Remains, like thinking of the beauty of remains, of like scraps, of, dead stock leather and how to like create that to become something new on the body and to then like, yeah, like transition into a new life basically.
totally. And I think I wasn't putting it together until you just said it the way you said it. Sublime remains, like the remains of the creatures, remains of the entities that were roadkill at some point, essentially, right?
Yeah.
It's actually it's a really cool concept because once again it's like it's not something that uh you think of right away. Um there's a couple ways I want to take this. So for you, like this idea is completely original, or were you inspired by other things that that kind of brought this idea to be like, that's it, that's what I should be doing?
Yeah. I don't know, like I've always been into like kind of like not like the gross and decay kind of side of nature, but it's just like this really interesting side of nature that we don't normally like focus on, I guess. Like I was always drawing like beetles and insects, and eyes, and then what I think like during COVID, I was like walking around outside and like just trying to think of, what I want to spend my senior year like researching and doing. Um, and I would just like be walking around and I would like see this animal that people like you gaze on it and it's like you don't want to focus on it, but everyone looks at roadkill, everyone looks at it. You know what I mean? So I was like, oh, this is a really interesting side that people don't normally talk about, I guess. And I was like, this it'd be interesting to like try to pull and show the beauty in it. Um, and then also just see what direction I can take it in.
Totally, totally. I love that. And
Mhm.
like how would you describe, like, for someone listening right now, they probably, if they haven't yet, they should, but they probably haven't gone to your Instagram if they've never seen you before. Maybe someone already knows about you, but maybe there's someone from my audience who doesn't know. Like, how would you describe your creativity and art to someone who has never seen it before, especially as we're talking about Sublime Remains?
Mhm. Yeah, so this was one of the hardest questions that I was trying to think of an answer to, but um I feel like it's very like tangible work. Like I guess how I would describe it is like things in the world that I see gets processed through my head and then I illustrate it and then dimensionalize it to then almost be like a performance on a day to day as you wear it outside. So it's like creatures and like this environment world that I'm building that people can be also like a part of too, So it's like this just new environment that I'm creating for people.
Definitely. And what are some of the actual, like, describe to them a little bit like the actual physical items, what they are, what they look like, what their purpose is as a, not as a form of wearable art, as a form of fashion that is also art, if that
Mhm.
makes sense.
Yeah, so I was mainly doing like animals like a deer, I did a possum, I did an alligator, um, I did a lot of geese. But yeah, it was like since it is still like it kind of it's like a offset version of nature, so it's like it kind of is exciting to have people like take the time to like process it and figure out what it is, because it almost makes them want to like go back into nature to reaffirm their like belief on what a deer looks like, what
Right.
is this what does this look like? Um, so yeah, I guess it's like your day-to-day scavengers that you find in the city because I am like in Chicago. So I was like, I mean, I guess alligators aren't in Chicago, but like, like the animals that I would see here that really influenced, what animals I would create to then, to live with you basically.
Mhm.
Um, yeah, so a lot of scavengers at the moment.
Yeah, for sure. And even like I'm gonna help paint this picture a little bit for the audience too, so that they understand is that the pieces, if I can even call them that, the art, the wearable art that we're referencing right now is kind of it, there's many versions, right? You have a wallet, there's a version.
Yeah.
You have kind of like side satchels or like layering. Like I don't even know how to describe them in a fashion sense in a way. How would you describe it? I don't, maybe you can just help me out here because what I want to do is I wanted the audience to like kind of be more able to visualize a little bit more so like what the actual like how would you describe the item of clothing on a body?
Yeah, so I kind of have two different variations. One that is more like a three-dimensional form,
Mm,
and then the other is like a flat wallet, like kind of harness structure. Because like a lot of the stuff that I use is like dead stock and upcycled material. So like when I was doing my collection, I would like find couches on the side of the road, kind of similar to roadkill, and like almost become my own taxidermy artist and like deconstruct these pieces to then be created like back onto the body.
yeah,
But also like with the more flat pieces, it's like you can kind of see like the layers of variation of color or more it's more like imagery based. I guess like it's more my flat illustrations that I cut out. Because then like all those layers from, the leather that I've sourced, whether that be the leather on the side of the road or like an old jacket that I find, they like layer together and write this new story for the person who's wearing them.
totally, 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 totally. It's cool. Honestly, like when and I mean, if I'm wrong about anything, if I'm misconstruing like your work in any way, stop me and correct me. But like the thing that's I think that's really cool about Sublime Remains is that there's all this like this double meaning. There's the idea that like you can kind of rebirth life, bring something back to life, which is
Mhm.
also a very like sustainable mindset, right? Is that, when you make food or when you're growing food on a farm or when you're creating leathers or doing anything in fashion and industry, like you want to do it in such a way that it can be regenerative, right? And that's the kind of idea behind it as well as like everything that you're doing is from dead stock fabrics. It is like has a sustainable element to it, right? Which I think is really cool. Was that something that you knew from the get-go that you wanted to focus on? Is that something that like you've had with your creativity from since you were in high school, or was it something that you learned at the Art Institute of Chicago? Like walk us through the ideas behind why it has to be kind of sustainable and kind of has a lot of these upcycling elements.
Yeah, I feel like we need to be more like conscious of where our materials come from because there is so much um, waste and kind of consumption in fashion. So I just think it's also like much more interesting to use something pre-existing and to create something new out of it than to like use a fresh piece of fabric or fresh piece of leather just because it is like there's such a story behind it and it definitely changes like the way you construct it or the way your mind thinks to like, oh, I'm gonna keep this seam originally because that's what it used to be, and it just kind of changes the way you create your piece, and it also makes it like more unique and um, just more interesting, I guess,
Mm.
because there is so much information behind what it used to be.
Yeah, yeah. And I mean, when it comes to like understanding the patterns that take place in fashion that either you agree with or don't agree with, is there like a pattern or is there kind of I guess a goal? Is there a goal that you have with Sublime Remains that, moving forward, like for the rest of the year or for the next 8 months, is there a place you want to take Sublime Remains, in terms of kind of like what you want to create or yeah, I guess I'll stop it there. Like with what you want to create or what you want to achieve with Sublime Remains.
Yeah. Um, I feel like Sublime Remains can also like evolve into so many different directions. Like it can go more fine art or it can go more, fashion where I make, and produce small batches. So I'm just kind of figuring out like, because I want to basically do all of it. I want people to ha have accessibility and to be able to purchase a piece, but I also love to make like just one-of-one pieces that, you can have, and then it's just like this wearable piece of art that you have.
Mm,
Um, but I do kind of want to go into the more like fine art world and make more like leather wall sculptures or leather sculptures that can also still be worn, and kind of break like the fine art and wearable art wall. Because I feel like there is like a separation of like, okay, fashion designer, artist, so like merging the two of like, okay, like once you see it, you'll kind of understand more that it's not just like fashion is not just like what you wear on a day to day. It's more like a performance in that day to day that like takes place.
hmm. Explain that for me. Fashion is more of a performance
Mhm.
in the day to day. Explain that. Like what do you mean by that?
I feel
I'm
like
curious.
like my more sculptural bags, like I mean it is like a wearable functional art. So at the end of the day you can hang it up on the wall for display. But
Mm,
kind of when you go outside, I mean it causes, you know, I don't know, when people look at it, it's just like it breaks them out of this day-to-day pattern of like, oh, like what is that? Like never seen that before. And it starts conversation, and I feel like that's really important. Um, yeah, and it also makes the people whoever is wearing it feel more creative. So I feel like that's more of like the performance of like I feel like even every like fashion designer in a sense is almost a performance artist because you're putting this art on the runway, you're putting this art into the world. So I guess that's what I mean by
yeah.
performance.
No, that makes a lot of sense. That makes sense. When you put it in that context, that makes a ton of sense because um there is a difference between art that is meant to be observed and art that is meant to be lived in,
Yeah,
right? That
that's
is
true.
that not meant to be but can be, right? Because
Yeah,
there are some things like if we're talking about if we're even if we're talking about like paintings versus like illustration for an animation or something like that. Like there's a different way that we as human beings interact with those pieces of art, right?
yeah,
And I think for like what you're doing and like this idea of like having it almost seems like you're having a hard time choosing between like do I just want it to exist as something to be observed or do I want it to exist as something that people can interact with in terms of like communicate with, which is fashion, right? Because
yeah,
fashion is like a part of which in the way in which we communicate and we show our identity through and we to show what we support and what we don't support,
yeah.
which is really, really interesting. I almost forgot to mention this because I'm looking at your Instagram again. I don't know how you feel about like AI fashion, AI art, but you know what was interesting? I, when I look at some of the images, like some of the things that you've created,
Uh-huh.
it almost in a way like I remember when like and AI is still pretty big, but I remember like in 2022, 2023, maybe just last year, like there were a lot of examples of like AI fashion. And for some reason, I don't know if you've been told this before, like the AI fashion that I've seen in a lot of ways resembles your work, but in a very much more flat kind of sad way. But
Uh,
like it's very interesting. Have you ever heard anyone say that to you, or do you know about AI, kind of the art things happening with AI?
I have a little bit. Yeah, I actually was told I was like I went to Europe like I think a year ago, and I went and got a tattoo by someone, and the tattoo artist was like, "Oh, like I saw your work, but I thought it was AI. I didn't know it was real, but it was like before like AI was like a thing." I'm like, "That's so interesting that like," and now I look at it, I'm like, "Oh yeah, it does kind of look like AI, generated," which is really interesting.
How do you feel about that? Does that kind of like does it kind of upset you, or do you like interesting and like you just keep it stepping?
Yeah, I feel like I mean like I I feel like I don't know how I feel about it really.
Hmm.
I I've like seen it on Instagram, and like I've had like AI accounts follow me, and I'm always like a little like suspicious. I'm like, what are you doing on here? Um, but yeah, I feel like it's interesting how I made something that is kind of like yeah, the AI is generated now. I don't know how I really it's interesting. I'm still like processing it, I guess.
Yeah. Yeah. I don't know where I would how I would feel about it either. And it's okay not to have an answer too, because AI is just a weird freaking thing. Like I don't know what sometimes I don't know what to think either. Besides like Doomsday, besides like iRobot.
No.
Uh, all right, back to Sublime Remains. So really interesting. And
Mhm.
then, I mean, everything you've said up until this point is like kind of like this repurposing of roadkill and like sustainability and upcycling and leathers and all these things.
Yeah,
And you use your glass blowing skills like for like the little eyes that you use and a lot of the pieces that you have or a lot of the art that you have.
yeah,
And then there's me coming across an aviator hat on Instagram.
yeah.
And I feel like this is a slight deviation away from some of the other things that you're doing or have done in the past. Do you feel that way as well?
I feel like it's definitely in a new direction. I feel like the aviator hat stemmed from still like my research when I was at SAIC. I remember my junior year, I had to do a historical garments project. And we had to choose a person and then make a garment like historically correct to that person. So I did choose Ruth Elder, who was an aviatrix. So I had
Mm,
made like a aviator helmet a long time ago. Um, it was out of like it was still out of like an old couch that I found, so like still in the stems from the same thing. But I was like, wow, like this is really interesting. I feel like I'm definitely gonna come back to it. I feel like I just this was my time to like kind of circle back. And I'm just trying to like mainly just experiment of, kind of it's still you still see similar shapes and the eye still comes back in the back of the head.
mm,
Um, but it's just a slight kind of like deviation from my animals. It's kind of I still picture it as it's still in the same like biome or environment. Maybe it's just like the character that I'm kind of building within that environment.
totally.
And that the eye kind of is always the thing that reconnects it because it's like this like deconstruction of the human anatomy and also like the deconstruction of like the couch and garments and how those like form back together. Um, so yeah, I'm like I really like the style of that, and I think I still want to like explore that and then make more garments and bags in that same vein. But yeah, it is a little bit a turning point from the animals.
Yeah, but I think I like the fact that you said that it's almost like this character within the world that you're building. Your world building, excuse me. Your world building, right? And I don't know how like some people, some artists, some creatives like take this idea of world building incredibly serious. I've had individuals on the podcast who, I've had Owen Hyatt who he's a fashion designer. He's a designer out of
Yeah,
Los Angeles. And like what he loves to do is and what he was inspired by when he was younger was the worlds and the characters and the outfits of the video games he played in, right?
yeah,
So like there would be I can't remember his exact ones like but like for example Halo something like that right like this entire ecosystem of clothing and aesthetics and everything that goes into this environment he tries to capture that and put that
yeah.
into a form in which we can digest which is more fashionable more contemporary but he tries to use those things as references and tries to also world bend for you it
Mhm.
seems like and for me like from my point of view, like this kind of reminds me of a lot of ways another brand called this. Sometimes I talk way too fast. This
It's all
also reminds me of another brand that I love called Story MFG. And what Story MFG does is they use a lot of very sustainable dyeing and
Mhm.
ancient kind of techniques for garment making and they often use the star motif. And I'm a sucker for star motifs. I don't know why. Like to me, like if you put a star on something that is wearable, I'm gonna want it probably 30 times more than if it just was a blank thing. And
Yeah.
so when I saw the aviator, um, I saw it and I kind of looked at it in a tunnel vision kind of way. Because when I saw it, I didn't really know about any of the other designs, right? I didn't really know about the other creations. And so for me, like I looked at it as this like funky, super cool, like the leather, like the color of the leather was like so like it was so cool, so gooey. Like it just like it literally like screams at you off the screen. And then I love the fact that it was lined, and I don't know, it was just a very, very cool item of clothing that stood out. And then like you said, there's the eye that's like at the like kind of the top of the crown, like the rear crown of
Yeah.
the aviator. And actually I should have asked you about that. What is the idea behind that? Because I feel like it's in every single one of it seems like every single one of your creations. What is the reasoning behind the eye?
Yeah, I mean that still stemmed from just like giving giving life to something that doesn't normally have life, I guess, and just like because when you, I mean, I feel like when you look at an eye, it is like this connection point of like human interaction, but then once it's on an object that it doesn't usually have an eye, it kind of like makes your brain confused, I guess. So I love to like have this confusion that happens when you look at something and then you think of that it's something else. So I guess just like, giving life to my pieces, I feel like you have to put some type of like human interaction with it. I feel like the eye is what like draws you into that.
Totally. Totally. And I think it's like when I look at your page, I'm looking at Sublime Remains and like I see the aviators, I see the wallet, and then I see an individual who has like a star painted over their actual physical eye.
Oh
And
yeah.
I find that to be like a very interesting way to kind of play with this idea of like what you're talking about, how your eyes are often talked about as like the into your like the gates into your soul, like that's where we see connection and all these things. Like, and you're right, it does kind of play with your brain when you see an eyeball, like even on like on a rock or something like that, like you just glue it on, like it looks kind
Yeah.
of different.
Yeah.
Um, but yeah, let's see. Yeah, I mean, that's that's where I wanted to go with Sublime Remains and kind of talk about it. Is there anything else that we didn't mention? I'm super excited to get the Aviator in hand to like see it, feel it, and see your work in hand. But now knowing how like the way you think about your work is that you like creating products that are one off or one of one or like a small batch or like on to the next thing. For me, it makes it like incredibly special to have a piece of your work that like I can wear and show and talk about and be like, I was there when it was early.
Uh-huh.
I think that's cool. But is there anything else that like with Sublime Remains that like you feel like you can speak to and want the people to know who if this is your first podcast, what would you want people to know? What else would you want people to know about it?
Yeah, I mean, I just the fact that it is like wearable functional art, so you can hang it up on your wall when you're at the end of the day, and also like I think it's really cool to like start to build this community like of Sublime Remains. Because like if you're out in the world and you're wearing something and you see another person wearing Sublime Remains, it's like this like kinship that you have with each other, because it's like, oh, that was like with this drop, or this is like, oh, this was only one, and then you have this, you like open communication and then conversation and make a new friend out of it.
Definitely. Definitely. Yeah, and that's the cool thing about brand building as well is that like if you're there early to the party, like there's something special about being early to the party,
Yeah,
right? It's not as cool when you're, you know, midway late to the party. It's still cool, and I only wish the best for you that you have many, many, many people who are early, middle, late, and for the rest of your creativity because you don't want people. I would never want you to not have people at the party. I think you'll have people at the party, but it's cool that I get this piece so early, and it's cool to be able to kind of talk to you like this and hear your voice. And I guarantee you'll look back on this conversation 5 years from now, and you'll be like, damn, like this interview, like I'm so like creatively different from what I was than what I
yeah.
was 5 years ago. That's just the way it goes. All right, I want to kind of close this off because we're honing in on an hour here. I just want to ask you some fun questions and then we'll end off on a concluding question. Um, one of the things that you talked about, like even when you're in school, is that you work pretty hard. You work, you know, you said you sometimes sew instead of going to sleep.
Yeah,
Which is, you know, that's work ethic.
yeah,
How do you combat becoming overwhelmed and burning out or just feeling overwhelmed?
yeah. That's a hard question because I do work like I'm at the studio like every day, like 9 to 9, basically just like sewing. But like I don't see myself doing anything else. So, like I kind of like at the studio, I'm like, oh, like if you weren't doing this, what would you be home doing? Like I would be sitting on the couch doing that. So I'm like, okay, I'm just gonna stay here. But I guess like with burnout, I don't know, like sometimes I ignore it, which isn't that good. But then other times I'm like, okay, I'm gonna like go on a walk, or like go get some ice cream and
Mm.
just take a breather for a sec. And then like once I'm outside, I'm like, oh wow, the sun is here. Like this is great. But yeah, it also helps like just to get out of your head and kind of, you know, get also more inspiration of like, oh, I see a crack on the ground. That's really cool. Let me take a picture of that. And that can like you know, be with this garment or like kind of combine into different pieces as well. But yeah, just to like go on a walk, listen to music, different podcasts or like audiobooks really help to ground me, I guess.
What are some of your favorite podcasts?
Um, the Mushroom Revival podcast, it like talks all about just a whole bunch of like different mushroom facts, and they interview like scientists and people from all over the world, like, oh, how chocolate is made. That like includes like fermentation, or like, oh, with this bark, the grooves of this is because of a mushroom. It's just
Wow.
like, and I feel like I learned just a lot of random facts through different stuff, or like, yeah, go dancing or just yeah, but then yeah, get out of my studio, I
Get
guess.
out of the work mode.
Yeah,
Mushrooms is cool. Mushrooms are cool. I was at farmer's market. It's called like Harper's Bazaar. It's on the Upper West Side here in New York. And there was this mushroom soda, if I'm not
oh,
mistaken, where like yeah, it was made out of like the main ingredient was mushroom something.
like
And I didn't
lion's
have, huh?
like lion's mane or something, like all the like health mushroom type
Yeah,
stuff.
I can't remember. My girlfriend, she had a sip. I did not have a sip, and she said it was good. She said it was delicious. Um, I didn't have a sip not because I didn't want to, but because I didn't want to have too much sugar, which
Yeah.
maybe sounds equally as lame, but that's just who I am. What about your favorite animals? Because obviously you work a lot with animals. Do you have a
Mm.
favorite animal?
Yes, hands down, I feel like a chameleon is my favorite animal, just because they're like so, I don't know, they move so interesting, like move so like bizarre.
Yeah, they do move bizarre.
They move when bizarre. Whenever I bike to my studio every day, so whenever I have to like go to Joann's to like pick up like a grommet or like sewing needles or something, I always stop into PetSmart, because they have this chameleon there, and I'm like have my hand against the glass. Like one day, like I just go and visit him. So yeah, I have a pet chameleon. Basically, it's just not physically mine yet,
You
but
have a pet chameleon that is not living with you, but it's
yeah,
yours.
yes, but it's mine. Like for sure.
That's good. Um, and I have to ask you about Chicago. We talked a little bit about how like the streets are clean and things like that. I think we were recording when we said that. That was like an hour ago. That was a long time ago.
Yeah.
Um, but I think we did. But like, what about food in Chicago? Like, is there any like do you have like a top or favorite go-to place that you like to eat at in the city?
Yeah. Um, yeah, there's this really good Vietnamese restaurant that's by my studio. I think it's called
Mm.
Coco Vietnamese restaurant. It's in like Avondale area. And then there's a really good Puerto Rican restaurant that's like around the corner from me. I cannot remember the name of it, but
Mm.
it's
Both
also
those sounds delicious. I was eating chips and carrots before I started recording, and I'm starving. I cannot wait to eat
yeah.
some food right now. I know what time is it there? It's like 6 o'clock?
Yeah, it's 6.
Oh, so you're just an hour behind. So you still have daylight. We're getting dark here in New York.
Yeah, I forgot some light on.
All right, well, Av, it's been great. It's been great to have you on the show. I was wondering if we were gonna hit the hour mark. We're at 59 minutes and 20 seconds, whatever it is right now, but you did a fantastic job. I have one more question for you. And hopefully with this question, the people who are listening, if you've enjoyed the episode, make sure you give us a 5-star review. Like I always say in the beginning, it means a lot to me. If either of your parents are listening, because I know like after you do a first interview, like usually a lot of parents listen, and that's
Yeah.
cool. I love that. Shout out to mom and dad for listening if you made it to this point. Last question I want to ask you is what is the motivation behind why you create the art that you create? What motivates you?
Yeah, I feel like I mean, it's just self-expression and it's what fulfills me basically. Like I mean, you know that I've always been immersed in art and this is what makes me just extremely happy. So like if I can do this on a day-to-day, make the bare minimum and be able to create and make what I do and share that with people, like that's the top motivation.
Av Grannan, ladies and gentlemen, thank you so much for being on the show. It was a treat, true,
Yeah,
true treat to have you.
having me, it was fun.